Blizzard have released a second housing preview, and let me put it this way. When I first saw the news, while I was scrolling through the official article about it on my phone, I actually had to stop and put my phone down and take some time just to breathe because I was getting so excited, my hands were physically shaking. Even now, I have to stop every now and then and calm myself down. But I can't help it because this is looking good. This is looking really, really good. I mean, not all the videos themselves. Unfortunately, the resolution on some of these is really low, so a small disclaimer about that. But the system is looking great. So let's go through the article together, and with a fine-tooth comb. Welcome home, adventurers! In our previous housing article, we shared a high-level overview of our plans and philosophies. This time around, we're getting concrete and discussing specifics for decoration systems. It allows us to not only show off some of what's possible, but also answer some of the common questions and concerns we've seen come up from the community. A couple disclaimers. This article only focuses on interior decoration systems and only in a single room. There's still plenty to cover beyond the basics of decoration, but that's for another time. We're going to show you a lot of work-in-progress assets and UIs, as well as using some terms that are not finalized. So please focus more on the functionality and less on the details of just how specific things look or sound just yet. With that out of the way, let's talk about decoration in housing. The article Blizzard mentions is the one that gave us our first glimpse of housing. They introduced us to their plans for Alliance and Horde neighborhoods and spoke a bit about the philosophies their housing system is based on. I did a full breakdown in a previous video, so you might be interested to check that out. One thing about that article is it only showed us concept art, but this time we're getting a real proper look at the systems we're going to be working with, videos and everything. Give or take. They were very careful to preface this article with a disclaimer reminding us that things are still in development, so the final result might not look exactly like what we're seeing now, and they keep repeating this disclaimer throughout. So just keep that in mind. Things might not look exactly the same. These are just previews. Let's all just try not to get too excited. Oh, who am I kidding? It's far too late for that. Getting down to basics. Decoration has two primary modes, basic and advanced, and you can freely toggle between them at any time while decorating with a key press. The fancy new mode names are basic and advanced. Okay, remember they did say names are probably going to change. And yes, the UI is subject to change, but let's take a nice close look at it anyway. Here we can see two menus, one at the top of the screen, the other at the bottom. The top menu is clearly in the house editing mode. We can also see a search icon, a settings icon, an exit icon, and this icon that looks a bit like a house with a Hearthstone swirl in the middle. Maybe that's for editing the outside of the house. The bottom menu seems to allow the player to select their decoration mode. On the right, we can see resources, no doubt the main currency that will be used in the system, like garrison resources. A lot like garrison resources, it even uses the same icons that garrison resources did. The number of resources available changes periodically throughout the demonstration, but it goes up as well as down, and at no point do we see a change in response to the placement of a decoration. So it's hard to know exactly what these resources will be used for. We also see a menu of the different decorations. It looks like you can sort through your decorations by using filters as well as selecting categories like paintings, plants, or lighting. The menu also shows numbers next to the items, suggesting that at least these decorations are consumable isn't the right word here, but basically I think this means if you have 26 goblets and you put one down as a decoration, you will have 25 goblets left. If you pick that goblet up, you'll have 26 again. In other words, those flamingos in Siren Isle are definitely decorations. I am 100% convinced of that now. And also, this really does have the potential to revitalize professions in a big way, providing professions are used to create some of these decorations, since there will be a demand of entire stacks of certain items. But let's take a closer look at these modes. In general, basic mode sounds like it's going to be how we place most of our decorations. Basic mode allows you to quickly place or remove objects and move them around while keeping their movements somewhat constrained to make putting something together quick and easy. It has a number of rules in place to help with this. Decor can be moved around on the ground and will move on top of things as it bumps into them or down to the ground as they reach the edge. This lets you move around and have them interact in the expected way. Decor can be rotated around its up axis with rotation snapping to 15-degree increments, so objects don't accidentally unalign with other objects as you rotate them. In other words, decorations can be moved around on top of a surface the way you'd expect. If it bumps into a higher surface, it'll move up on top of that, and it'll go back down if it's directed over a lower surface. The rotation is also limited but controlled since it snaps to 15-degree increments. Decor has collision with other pieces of decor as well as the floor, wall, and ceilings, and players are unable to move decor through other things. No losing things in the walls. Decor will align to the floor, wall, or ceiling depending on what sort of decor it is. E.g., a rug will align with the floor while a painting will align with the wall. If you move it around the corner, it will continue to align properly. This also means decor will snap to the ground if you move it off something. And if you're thinking, what if I want a rug to align with the wall? What if I want it to be a tapestry? Did you ever think about that? Player housing ruined because I can't use rugs as tapestries. Well, don't worry, because again, we're talking about basic mode here. Certain types of smaller decor will parent to certain types of larger decor when placed on top of them. This means when you move the larger decor, the smaller decor moves along with it. This allows you to, for example, place books on a bookshelf and then move the whole shelf instead of having to move everything individually. And this is where I had to stop to breathe, because do you realize what this means? You see, in some MMO systems, a bookshelf is just a solid decoration. The books on the shelf aren't individually placed. You can't pick them up and read them or anything like that. Bookshelves are just for show. But here, Blizzard are talking about placing books on a shelf individually and then being able to move them with the shelf. In a game that's already filled with books to discover and collect, we're going to be able to pick up those books, take them home, and put them on our bookshelves. We're getting libraries. Real libraries. If you're so inclined, and I am, you can sit down in your library and read the books that you've discovered on your travels. And okay, maybe you think I'm reading too much into this. Couldn't the books just be decorative objects? Why assume we'll be able to read them? Well, if you look closely at the demonstration, one of the books that we see being placed on the table is named Twilight's Blade Book 2. Compare that to the names of the other decorations we see, which have names like Forsaken Table and Goblin Casino Fancy Chair. But this book isn't named Medium Book Open, it's very clearly the name of the title of this particular book. And it's one of a series, which suggests there will be other books to discover and collect. Twilight's Blade Book 2 is not a book that's currently available in-game, but the Legion Priest Order Hall campaign to obtain the artifact version of Xalatath is called Blade in Twilight, so this book seems likely to be something we might come across soon, probably just in time to use it as a decoration. In the decorations menu, I also can't help but notice at least one stack of books. Considering Twilight's Blade Book 2, I wonder if this means we will be able to get a stack of books decoration if, for example, you collect all the books from one series, because that would be amazing. So, libraries confirmed, it's official, and you can't tell me otherwise. Players can show a grid and enable snapping, which will snap decorations to the points on the grid, helping you to keep everything neat and tidy. It will even shrink down when you're placing something on a smaller surface, like a table. We see all of this in the demonstration. Basic mode has toggles, one that causes it to snap to grid and one that's called free placement, which has the description turn on to ignore some collision and placement restraints. It does seem like both toggles can be on together. Advanced interior design. But that's so restrictive, we hear you saying. I mean, no, honestly I wasn't saying that. Already the system looks streets ahead of what I was expecting. But okay. Don't worry, just switch to advanced mode and feel the true power at your fingertips. Advanced mode effectively turns off a lot of the rules of basic mode, but also offers up additional tools of its own as well. And yeah, advanced mode is where things get really interesting thanks to all these rules being turned off. Decor has no collision in advanced mode. Want to push a chair into the wall? Enjoy! You can enable Gimbals, little 3D controls on objects, which will let you move objects on all three axes, including floating them up into the air without having to jump through hoops. A different gimbal can be used to rotate an object freely on any axis as well. A gimbal is a pivoted support that permits rotation of an object about an axis. So yes, if you want to put a rug on the wall, there you go, player housing is saved. If you want a table to float in the air, you can do that. I've already seen people talking about building jumping games in their houses. I don't necessarily understand the desire for more jumping games in World of Warcraft myself, but you know, it's cool that it's something you'll be able to do. I do wonder a bit about how basic and advanced mode will interact with each other, particularly when it comes to things like rotation. Say, for example, you want to do a house where all the furniture is on the walls, as if gravity is working in a different direction. Could you rotate the furniture close to the wall using advanced mode, and then when you switch on basic mode, have the furniture now snap to the wall instead of the floor? It would certainly make that sort of decoration a lot easier than individually using advanced mode to exactly place every item of furniture without clipping or getting the angles a degree or two wrong. I hope so, because that's something I would like to see. Either way, something that really excites me about advanced mode is the fact that we'll be able to change the scale of decorations. Finally, a third gimbal can scale an object size up and down within some generous limits, making something smaller or giant. We will have to see what these generous limits are, but I imagine this means if you want a giant martini glass in your house for no particular reason, you can do that. It's worth noting that while items placed on top of this table stay on top of it while it's being scaled and moved around and floated, the only thing they don't do is scale with it, which makes sense for some situations. If you put a couple of bottles on a table and then decide they look nicer if you increase the size of one of them, you don't want everything else along with the whole table to scale up in size as well. I do wonder if there will be a way to select all when scaling though. If you want to make an already filled bookcase slightly smaller to better fit into a space, you don't really want all the books to stay the same size when you scale down. As for the advanced mode menu, we can see there are 4 toggles. These are tied to the gimbals and all 4 are demonstrated. Thanks to advanced mode, the possibilities are genuinely endless. It's the sort of creative potential that really does seem to deliver Blizzard's promise of boundless self-expression. Advanced mode lets you interact and design things with very specific controls to make whatever your heart may desire. Internally using this, employees have taken bushes and made them into garlands for their fireplaces, constructed a boat's prow from a bed, or made paint buckets into small spice racks for their kitchens. We don't get to see these examples, but if you look at the image, you can see things like this beer table that seems to have been made from a shelf and a barrel, or this vase of flowers that combines this goblet and these flowers from the furnishings menu. I personally cannot wait to start playing around with all of this myself. But I also hope we get a way to copy-paste our combinations so that we don't have to recreate the whole thing every time. In the demo videos, we can also catch a glimpse of the names of some of the other modes. Cleanup mode, which uses a broom icon and is no doubt used for packing decorations away, and Customize mode, which uses a paint palette icon. Which brings me to one of the biggest bombshells in the housing preview, one that has a lot of implications that go beyond player housing, the dye system. We've been dying for housing. In addition to the decoration modes, we wanted to call out some other functionalities and choices we've made, some because they're cool and worth sharing, and others because they directly answer some of the questions we've seen since the first article went up. For newly created assets, as opposed to legacy ones from existing art, we're allowing players to dye them a variety of colors. So if you find a chair but wish the upholstery was blue instead of grey, you can make that change. But what if the blue doesn't match the stain of wood or color of the metal now? Well, you can fix that as well. For newly created assets, not legacy ones for existing art. So if you're jumping up and down thinking this might end up being possible with transmog as well, fair, but just remember it doesn't mean we're going to suddenly be able to dye all our old transmog gear different colors. We're probably also not going to be able to dye all our decorations. I would personally hope that not all decorations use new assets, because there's a lot of really cool existing decor already in the game that I would like to have access to. But new assets are being made with this new dye system, and it works pretty much exactly the way you'd want it to. In the example they show, a wooden bed with metal fixtures, you can change the color of the bedding, the color of the wood, and the color of the metal, all completely separately from each other. They also dye the rug, and it also looks like we'll be able to dye the floor. I also think we might be able to dye things like the paintings. These two paintings look to me like the same painting of Dalaran, only one is blue and the other purple. And this dye system is exciting because boundless self-expression in player housing, obviously, but also because of what it implies for transmog and even other collectibles like mounts in the future. Diablo 4 has a transmog dye system that looks kinda similar to this. The customizable mounts introduced in Dragonflight also already have a dye system, though it's far more basic. If this system that we're seeing on furniture ends up being applied to something like future transmog assets, it would be revolutionary. Even though they haven't promised anything about a dye system being added to other places, I still think it's worth getting excited about. Although, if they did let us dye our own transmog, they wouldn't be able to keep selling us the same transmog over and over again in different colors. So the cynic in me does worry a bit that they'll never do it just because of that. But that's not all. It's not just decorations you can use to customize your space, but the wallpaper, ceiling, and flooring as well. You can mix and match these to elicit various cultures and vibes, or just make up your own. You can take things a step further too and use partition objects to build walls where none were before, letting you make rooms with arbitrary interiors. Speaking of mixing and matching, we saw a lot of questions about what would be allowed in terms of decor. Inside your home, you can decorate however you want, so if you want Blood Elf wallpaper with a stone roof and wooden floor, go for it. Obviously, this is all great. No one wants to feel limited or restricted, and the concept art of decorations that we saw before were very clearly just Alliance Human and all Chord. But the decorations we've been seeing in this post are clearly from a much wider range of both cultures, like the Goblin Sofas, to world events, like the Winter Veil Tree. One place we clearly are not going to feel restricted or confined to a certain aesthetic is inside our own homes. I do feel a bit like there's something unspoken here, some bad news that they're trying to break by telling us the good news first. Inside your home, you can decorate however you want. But on the outside, could that be a bit more restricted by things like faction and neighborhood? The concept art for neighborhoods does only show one major aesthetic in each, but it is just concept art. We'll have to see. I am very excited about the prospect of being able to build walls. Based on this image, you can be quite creative there as well. I like these curved nooks especially. This view also demonstrates the final mode, which we can see is used to view the house's floor plan. In the top right-hand corner, we can see a room limit, 2 out of 10, and floor, 0. This raises some questions, like will some houses have a bigger room limit than others? Will we need to unlock extra rooms, like garrison plots or bag slots in our bank? Also, the word room in this presentation clearly refers to a whole floor measurement rather than these smaller areas. Remember, Blizzard said we can use partition objects to build walls where none were before, allowing us to make rooms with arbitrary interiors. This floor plan is labeled square large, indicating the type of room it is. You'll probably get other rooms that can have descriptions like rectangle medium or circle small. So this isn't a room, this is a room. Yeah, they're definitely going to want to clear their language up around this one because I can see it getting confusing. Before we go outside, while we're not really talking about exteriors in this article, it's worth mentioning that the outside of your house has no bearing on how big the interior is. If you want a huge mansion outside with just one room inside, or a tiny shack on the outside but a dozen rooms inside, you do you. We'll share more about the exteriors for your home later though. So, one thing that stood out to me early on in this article was the demonstration of the window. First of all, windows are decorations. You can move them around freely, which also moves around the light it produces. And it makes no difference to the outside of your house, because the outside and the inside are two different things. I find this part a bit weird, and if I'm being honest, I don't love it, not as a standard. I like the idea of the occasionally bigger on the inside house. The whole TARDIS thing is fun every now and then. But for me, one of the enjoyable aspects of designing a house is planning around how the floor plan affects the way the house looks on the outside. Like in Sons of the Forest, I built this house around this giant window. It's the main feature of the house and the most noticeable thing on both the inside and the outside. I guess you can probably match your house's exterior to the interior, but I just would prefer houses to match naturally. It's gonna feel a bit too silly to me if every house I walk into is so completely different on the inside. I get that's a personal preference though. A lot of people will much prefer the unrestrictive nature of this decision, and I accept that. Based on what they're saying though, house type won't necessarily limit the number of rooms you can have available inside. So a bigger house doesn't mean you get 20 rooms instead of 10 or anything like that. Again, I find this choice a bit weird, but it's not exactly a deal breaker either. There's so much more to discuss with decorations. Where do we get stuff? How do I show off my collection of transmog, pets and mounts? How do professions fit in? And more. Never mind neighborhoods. And we can't wait to share more. Please keep sending us your feedback and we'll keep building. But in the meantime, here's another screenshot a team member made mixing some various styles. We look forward to sharing more with you as we continue to give you more insights on the new housing system. Oh yes, I am very curious to know more and have a whole new list of questions like how do we get Twilight's Blade Book 2? How do professions fit in? The fact that Blizzard themselves have now officially mentioned them in context with housing does seem like a good sign. Blizzard also mentioned the Transmog Pet and Mount collections, suggesting housing will have ways to show all of those off. But what about toys? A lot of toys really feel like they were tailor-made for housing, so surely they will fit into the system in some way, right? Blizzard says they can't wait to share more, and I can't wait to see more. World of Warcraft is extremely late in offering this housing system, but that has meant they get to give us a system that takes into account all the faults and flaws of other MMO housing. They already kind of boasted about that in their previous article where they reassured us that their system wouldn't have a lot of the problems that the Final Fantasy XIV system is infamous for. And now in this demonstration, we can see that things are looking pretty great so far. They've said many times over that they don't want to introduce housing unless and until they can do it right. And based on what we're seeing, it's looking like they're finally ready because they do have something that's going to make the wait worth it. World of Warcraft's system could end up becoming a contender for one of the best MMO housing systems that exist. And yes, I am sounding ridiculously excited, but I really am. My dream of owning a World of Warcraft library is about to come true. You can't tell me otherwise, and that prospect means I am on the highest of hopium highs. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, feel free to also like, subscribe, share, all that good YouTube stuff. I'd also like to gently highlight my Patreon, where you can support the channel directly. Finally, you can find me on Blue Sky or very occasionally Twitch, where I'm always happy to talk about all things World of Warcraft. So while that's all for now, hopefully I'll see you again soon.